The 1980s were a very important and formative time for me. I was a teenager for most of that decade, and movies were a big part of my free time. The 1980s were definitely influential. Some will claim it's the best decade for movies. There are quite a few podcasts dedicated to discussing that very thing. We saw the rise of directors like Spielberg, Cameron, and Burton. Actors took off include Stallone, Cusack, Cruise, and Murphy. Meg Ryan, Michelle Pfeiffer, and Molly Ringwald, and Gina Davis not only caught our eye, but they stole our hearts. In this episode, we will attempt to sift through those influential years, make some tough choices as we count down our top 7 movies of the 1980s.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Mark Wrong Tower, this is Albatross 1-3, requesting permission to land. Over.
I don't need a computer to tell me how to land a damn airplane.
6.
Heads-up display, check.
5,
Lasers, check.
4,
Particle beam, check.
3,
Proton bolts, check.
2,
Chair control, check.
1.
Let's do it.
Broadcasting from a secret underground location somewhere in Mos Eisley, this is the Docking Bay 77 podcast. Make yourself comfortable. The show is about to start. Hello and welcome to the Docking Bay 77 podcast. I am your host, Dayton Johnson. Let me introduce. He loves the movie year of 1984. He's the co-host of the Apples and Oranges podcast. It's Deaf Dave himself, David Wright. How's it going, Dave?
Very good. How are you doing?
I'm good. Happy to be here and having this discussion.
Yes, sir. Glad to be back on Docking Bay 77.
All right. He loves 80s movies so much, he and his buddy D started a podcast to spend more time discussing them. It is Jason Colvin of the Surely You Can't Be Serious podcast. How's it going, Jason?
It is going great. I am glad to be here discussing top 7 80s movies with you wonderful dudes.
It's been a while. You guys were, you and D were here. We did Who Framed Roger Rabbit last summer. So that was a great episode.
Right. Yeah. That was a lot of fun. And I had to mark that off my list because technically I've covered it. So.
It had to come off my list too. All right. He is the herald of the small, indie, and unusual movies. And I hope his list does not disappoint. One of our regulars, it is Robert Burnett. How's it going, Robert?
Oh, I've got some oddities for you tonight. I worked hard to find some stuff that hopefully will be exciting and new for everybody.
I was counting on it. All right. So let's take a minute. Dave, why don't you tell people about your podcast?
All right. Well, starting in February, my son and I launched a podcast together. It is a Beatles versus Beach Boys podcast. We call it Apples and Oranges, in which we compare Beatles albums to Beach Boys albums in a 1v1 format that would probably be very familiar to regular listeners of the Surely You Can't Be Serious podcast. So it's been a lot of fun. This is chronicling my discovery of the Beatles discography. I've never really explored their albums before, so I'm having a lot of fun doing that. And at the same time, trying to make the case for the Beach Boys. But every matchup is a two-parter. At the end of the two-parter, we give our final judgments, and we don't play homers. And some of these decisions have been really tough. But we've been having a lot of fun with it. It's a limited run. We started in February 1963, when those first albums came out that we discussed on our show, and we're going to go through 1970, which is probably going to have us wrapping the show up in early August, I believe.
All right, very good. I know I've been enjoying the episodes, but it's been hard for me to pick a Beach Boys album over a Beatles album. So sorry, I've been trying. I've been giving it a fair shake, but it's been hard.
That's all right. I'm still working on you.
All right, cool. Jason, why don't you tell people a bit about your podcast before we move on?
Sure. So my buddy D and I, we were jogging buddies, and as we were jogging, we would have these pop culture discussions. I remember one night we were talking about whether Michael Jackson's Thriller album was better or worse than Michael Jackson's Bad album. And that led to kind of a heated debate while we were running. And so we thought, man, we need to capture these conversations. And so we created the Surely Can't Be Serious podcast, where we match up an iconic album versus another iconic album and try to decide which is better. And we've done movies, we've done TV, we've done theme songs, and we've had a lot of fun. You've been on our show, Dave's been on our show, so that's who we are, and that's what we do.
Yeah, and I've been listening to you guys pretty much close to right after you started. I remember coming across a sponsored post on Facebook, and I loved the name, and I was like, I got to check this out. So, but yeah, it's been a while, so it's always good. It's always
We're in
good.
our 5th season, so thank you.
I know, quite a commitment, huh?
Yeah.
I'm thinking, am I going to make it to 5 seasons? We'll have to find out. All right, very good. So, as I said in the intro, we are discussing and counting down our top 7 movies from the 1980s, but I did give these gentlemen a few rules. Now, the first one was inspired by Robert's episode when they counted down the top 7 movies of the 1970s. So, on our lists, we are not allowed to have any top 10 box office movies from this decade, which includes no E.T., Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, any of the Indiana Jones movies, Batman 89, Back to the Future, Top Gun, or Rain Man. So those are completely off the list. And also, for us that have podcasts and discuss movies, we were not allowed to have any movies that are what we did an episode on as well. So I know that was a bit of a challenge for Jason, and I know it was a bit of a challenge for me, not nearly as tough as it was for him. So I do kind of apologize for that, but I think our lists will be better for it. I just didn't want, 4 lists with Raiders of the Lost Ark and Aliens on it. And, this way we get a lot more movies mentioned. So
You would have had 3 lists and then still mine.
yeah, that's very true. That's very true, Robert. Fantastic. So I do have a question. Did my rules banish your favorite movie from the 1980s off of your list? Dave.
Yes.
And what was that movie?
It was Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah, that was mine too. I'm wearing my shirt right now.
Yeah. I mean, to me, I was 10 years old when Raiders of the Lost Ark hit the theaters. I spent the entire summer at the multiplex. I must have seen it a dozen times just that summer. It defines that point in my life. I have pre-Raiders and I have post-Raiders. And it remains always in contention for my number 1 movie of all time. I tell people it's always swapping places with Adventures of Robin Hood from 1938, so as far as my favorite movie of all time. So I'm looking at it with a broad perspective, and The Archaeologist still comes out on top.
All right, very cool. How about you, Jason?
Yes, you did.
Oh, wait, I'm gonna guess. Was it Back to the Future?
No, it was not. It was Raiders of the Lost Ark. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, okay.
Number 1.
All right. I wasn't sure. For some reason, I thought it was Back to the Future. I apologize, but no,
That's okay.
No,
That took Back to the Future. I took Raiders.
That's right. I knew somebody over there did. Now, how about you, Robert?
Did not, although I love a lot of those movies,
Okay.
and saw them all. The 80s was really a rich decade for me for movie going. So I was able to find others that worked out just as well.
Cool. So, how did you guys, with those rules in place, how did you guys build your list? Dave?
Oh, it was pretty easy. I don't podcast about movies. So I had a lot of low-hanging fruit that I could choose from. You only gave me 10 not to touch.
All right, that's
that was
fair.
very easy for me. Yeah.
All right. How about you, Jason?
Yeah, so I did my list. I had to knock out 57 80s movies that were in it. So
Wow.
when you asked me, you said, "Hey, we're going to do top 10 80s movies or top 5 80s movies or top 7, whatever it was." I was like, boom, okay, so it's Empire, it's Raiders, it's Back to the Future, it's Die Hard, it's Top Gun. I had my list.
Right.
And then you're like, wait a minute. All those are off the table. So what I did is I went year by year, and I just wrote down my favorite movies of the year. And then I kind of circled my extra favorites and then kind of culminated a list and then scaled back to just 7. So
awesome. That's very
I am
cool.
not complaining. I think it's going to be fun. I think we're going to have to go a little bit deeper into the well to find some gems, and I accept the challenge. So,
all right, very cool. How about you, Robert?
I went with kind of my usual filters of movies that I still want to watch again and will pull out from time to time and review. I had, like others, a really long list initially. I had about 35 films I was thinking about, and the last month or so gave me a time to go through and watch some of them. And unfortunately, some of them were better as memories than they were as films that I would recommend today. There's a few on my runner-up list that I would recommend, but in a very qualified way. This was a great way to do that, but to find the ones that just, I still talk about, I still think about all the time.
All right. Very cool. So after I sifted through all the movies that I've discussed, now I included my appearances on a Film Bi's 1986 series, so I couldn't talk about those either. I wanted to make sure that everything on my list I own a copy of. So everything I talk about tonight, I actually own on either DVD or Blu-ray. And it was ones that a lot of which I wanted to make sure I saw in the theater. There's a couple that I caught a little bit later, but they're all ones that not only were great then, but are still great now. They still hold up, and I never get tired of them. And I wanted to make sure I had a variety as well. So yeah, I was a little bit surprised with what ended up on my list. So this is going to be a lot of fun.
So let's do this thing!
So our order is going to be Dave will go first, then I will go, then Jason, and then Robert. We're going to count down to number 2, hit some honorable mentions, and then when we get to our number 1s, we will try to guess each other's after some clues. So this is going to be great. So, number 7, Dave.
Okay, so as it turns out, I have the entire decade fairly well represented. Of my 7 movies, I only have one from a given year. I have 7 different years represented.
Okay, wow.
Okay, in that case, I will start with number 7. Had to go with one of the biggest action movie stars of the decade. This is actually my favorite movie of his from that decade, and I'm going with Predator. So I love Predator. I love just the combination of that, the tough guy, the big gun in the jungle. It's kind of like another permutation on the Rambo template, but then it turns into a sci-fi. It's kind of sci-fi. It's kind of horror. And you got Jesse the Body Ventura. So how can you go wrong?
Yeah, I saw that in a theater on a double date, and surprising the girls went out with us again. So they
Yeah, I prefer Predator over Terminator.
What?
I love Predators. It's a good one for me.
I don't pick it over. I don't pick it over Terminators, but no, it's still a fun movie. But wow, okay, dropping some knowledge there. Thank you, Dave. All right, my number 7, I did see in the theater, and I love it. My daughter is terrified of this movie, and I'm a Muppet fan, so I couldn't get the Muppet movies in here. So this is The Dark Crystal from 1982, directed by Jim Henson and Frank Oz. A definite tonal change from the Muppet movie and The Great Muppet Caper. I love the visuals in here. The creatures are both adorable and terrifying. Some are nightmare-inducing, the Skeksis to be one. So on Netflix, you can pick your icons for who you are, whatever. So on Netflix, my icon is actually the Whimpering Chamberlain is who I chose for me, so to represent my image. So I love this movie. I love that the world building and the risks that these guys took, going from what they had been doing to this, man, it's just gorgeous and beautiful. And the fact that they actually did a Netflix series, to kind of follow up on it, years later, speaks to how long it's lasted. So The Dark Crystal is my number 7.
I think that movie is an impressive achievement and an important mark in his career. Yeah.
Agreed.
And to piggyback on the world building, because this film almost made my top 7. It just kind of fell off because I thought maybe somebody else would have it. But there was a wonderful book by the concept illustrator, and I forget his name right now, Brian something, when the film came out. And the film is so rich in a lot of the little symbols on the walls and the shapes of things and the colors. Everything was thought out and has a meaning. And if you can find this companion book, I think it was called The World of the Dark Crystal. It is extraordinary what depths they went to for stuff that you would not see necessarily even on the screen. And certainly they did not say, well, every time you see the spiral, that's because it means this to the Skeksis. And, but it was all there, which I think made it richer, even though we didn't necessarily know why.
Right. All right. Very good. All right, Jason, you're number 7.
Okay. My number 7, believe it or not, is from the year 1989.
I'm shocked.
I'm a big proponent of 89. I thought it was the best year of the 80s. But in this movie, you get star Robin Williams as a teacher who's inspiring young men to seize the day and make their lives extraordinary. So for me, my number 7 pick is Dead Poet Society.
Wonderful choice.
He does such an amazing job. He switches off the Mrs. Doubtfire and Aladdin person, and he becomes this teacher who changes these boys' lives. And the end scene when, he's being fired and everybody's too chicken to stand up and do anything. Ethan Hunt.
Wrong movie.
Ethan Hawke stands.
I want to see that movie.
Yeah. Stands on his desk and he says, "Oh, Captain, my Captain." You have this just wonderful, heartwarming scene at the end where he stands up for this teacher. So for me, number 7, Dead Poet Society.
Fantastic.
I think it inspired a generation of teachers.
Yeah, I actually had an English professor that hated that movie, and I couldn't believe
No.
why. And he goes, well, "That's because after that movie, everybody expected us to be like that." and that's quite a difficult challenge. I said, "Well, okay, yeah, I can kind of see that," because he was an English professor, so he kind of felt the pressure. All right,
Robin Williams, I mean, the 80s, like you were mentioning some of the other stars earlier, I mean, that was his decade. He did 11 movies in the 80s. I mean, he started with Popeye, which was maybe not the best film, but ended up with Good Morning Vietnam and Dead Poet Society and a bunch of other ones. And someone else like Henson, who left too soon. But gosh, that was such a good decade for him.
Yeah, it was.
Give us such a range of films.
Yeah, it was nice to see him make that departure from comedy into such a movie. So yeah, fantastic. All right, Robert.
All righty, my number 7 is the film The Company of Wolves.
Ooh,
It was
okay.
early film by Neil Jordan before he went on and did Crying Game and Interview with a Vampire. But it is this kind of weird mashup of fairy tales and werewolf stories all in one. In fact, in the film itself, they actually tell 4 additional stories beside the stories that are interwoven through the film itself. There's a lot of storytelling happening on screen. Angela Lansbury plays Red Riding Hood's granny. In perfect casting. She is so sinister, however, it's kind of hilarious. It's no Jessica Fletcher there. She is creepy as and then David Warner, who I love, is a part-time werewolf on that. There's cameos by Stephen Ray, and then who was in Crying Game later, and then also Terrence Stamp plays the devil in a brief scene because Priscilla wasn't enough for him to do. But it's a strange movie. It's all done on a soundstage, so the forests and trees are very stylized. Nothing is realistic at all, which works really well with the idea of a story within a dream, which is kind of how the plot unfolds. But it was a great beginning and a kind of a lesser known of his films compared to the things he's done since.
Right. I was expecting off and I already got unusual. So very good.
Okay. I've never heard of that movie, but it sounds awesome. What year did it come out?
84, I should have said. Yeah.
84 and werewolves? I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm shocked you haven't seen
for
it.
the time, reasonably good special effects, practical effects, not CG. Reasonably good werewolf effects for the time too. So
okay.
Awesome. Now I need to watch it. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Deaf Dave, you're number 6.
So number 6, I went with the greatest sports movie of the decade. Now, I know when people hear that, they quickly might gravitate toward The Natural or Hoosiers, but I'm here to tell you none of them are as patriotic as Rocky IV. The United States versus Russia in the boxing ring. It does not get better than that. 1985, the height of Ronald Reagan. This is the sports movie to represent the entire decade of the 80s. Can't be touched. Rocky IV.
Somebody play Burning Heart by Survivor right now.
And who knows? I mean, Russia versus US, we might be due for a remake or something soon. Who knows?
Well, that's unfortunately true.
Yeah, I just recently completed a complete like series rewatch of that entire franchise, and Rocky 3 and Rocky 4 still hold up, and it just doesn't get. I love the symbolism right there in '85. I was living that. I was living those times. You got USA versus Russia. It's just perfect. It's just perfect. Totally ridiculous and perfectly ridiculous. It's perfect.
I'm glad you added ridiculous. That really helps.
Well, ridiculous is a great segue. Dave, you haven't podcasted with me yet, but I can manage to work a Broadway musical into every episode. And
I've heard enough of the episodes. Yes,
and this is going to be it. There was a very short-lived musical of Rocky, the original Rocky film. It was a catastrophe, from what I'm told. The songs were about like you'd think they would be, and they did use though the little riff of "Gotta Fly Down" now during the overture, which got everybody excited. But then you never heard it again. So that was the first letdown in an evening of letdowns. But the big trick to this show was it was a normal show up on a stage. And as they got closer and closer to the climax, and they were going to have the big boxing match for the the finale, the stage slid forward and the seats swiveled around, and they put a boxing ring in the middle of the orchestra of the theater with seats all around it, and had a boxing match that you could see from all sides depending on where you were sitting. Had like a 10-minute boxing match with no singing, because that would have been even too much for a musical. And then when Rocky won, yay, the stage slid back into place and the seats went back into place, and then they had to sing and ruin it. But the set cost so much money that there was basically no practical way that the show ever would have broken even. It's a notorious famous flop, but even Rocky they tried to make into a musical. So there's no film that is untouchable.
Man, I would have loved to have seen that stage though. That would have been really cool to see that move and everything.
I think there's some bad slime tutorial like YouTube things you can find for it, but not enough people went there. I don't even think it got filmed in entirety, because it usually was an empty house.
All right, very good. I was wondering how long it would take before you managed to get Broadway in here. So thank you.
I got it out of the way early tonight. Out of the way early.
I'm looking at the rest of my list. I wonder how many other Broadway adaptations.
All right. My number 6 was actually a late addition. I dropped something off and replaced it with this because this is my first time seeing Dustin Hoffman in a movie. It was my first time seeing Gina Davis in a movie. And it is from 1982. It's 2 movies in a row from the same year, 1982. It is Tootsie, directed by Sidney Pollack, and of course starring Dustin Hoffman, Dabney Coleman, Jessica Lange, Terry Garr, Charles Durning, and a very subdued Bill Murray, as well as Gina Davis. By the way, in her feature film debut. The film was nominated for 10 Academy Awards. Lange did win for Best Supporting Actress. This was very much a cable watch for me. Obviously, my parents were not going to take me to the theater to see this. I mean, I'm sure they probably went, but at the time, I was just curious and was like, okay, what is this all to talk about? And man, I love this movie from the get-go. And here I am, 11, watching this movie and enjoying every minute of it. I love the humor. I love the story. And I swear Hoffman just does not age. He looks the same as he did in The Graduate. And even in the year 2000s, he still looks great. I don't even understand what's going on there. But anyway, a fantastic cast. Of course, I knew Coleman and Durning from the Muppet movies, so I was familiar with them. Acquired a copy of it a few years ago on DVD, and we've watched it a couple of times since. Man, it is still good. It is so great, and everything about it, I couldn't even think of a bad thing. But I've seen it dozens of times. Tootsie is just fantastic, so I absolutely love this movie. So it made my list at number 6.
I have actually never seen it.
You've never seen Tootsie?
I have not.
What?
I've only watched it like once 2 years ago. So
wow, man.
I came to it after it had been released and somehow missed it. And a friend was recommending it and talked it all up and said it was going to be so amazing. And I was sitting there like waiting for Meryl Streep, waiting for the divorce, waiting for everything. Realized later that they had chalked it up as if it were, the other one and not Tootsie. And I'm like, why is he in a dress? No wonder Meryl divorced him. Anyway, it was not Kramer. It was not Kramer versus Kramer, and it's an ugly mashup when you think it's one and it's the other one. It does not go well.
I can see the problems in that theory. Yes, that is not a good mashup. You're right.
That's like, you think it's Sprite, but it's really water.
Yeah, I've never watched Tootsie since. I can't bring myself to watch it because it just is uncomfortable.
Oh wow. Okay then. All right. Jason, you're number 6.
Okay, my number 6 is another movie from 1989, but I did not do this on purpose. It just happens to be. I'm telling you. So this list for me would not be complete without a movie from John Hughes. Okay.
Fair.
And the movies that didn't make the list are incredible, right? And for us, we've barely covered John Hughes. So Breakfast Club was on the table. Ferris Bueller was on the table.
Right.
Pretty in Pink, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. But for me, the movie of John Hughes that I enjoyed the most from the 80s is Uncle Buck.
Oh, really? Okay.
Candy as the move-in kind of slob uncle who manages to change the lives of sort of a belligerent teenage daughter, help her through a rough patch, and just the comedy that goes with it. The Macaulay Culkin character, it ended up giving us Home Alone.
Right.
And I just love this movie. It's just so fun and heartwarming, and I love it. Uncle Buck.
Out of all his movies, that's actually one I've seen the least amount of times, and I don't know why.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I've seen, Breakfast Club and Weird Science and Planes, Trains, Automobiles. I've seen those dozens of times, but this one I've only watched it maybe 2 or 3 times, and I don't know why. I mean, I enjoyed it every time, but it's not one I go back to, and I, for the life of me, can't figure it out. But I definitely understand the choice. It's, it's John Candy at his height, so for sure, great pick. Great pick.
Thank you.
All right, Robert, something unusual?
No, actually, something that was reasonably well known. It came out in '88 and got 7 Academy Award nods. One adapted screenplay, art direction, and costumes. I have a lot on here that won Best Costume. I don't know if I like pretty movies or what, but anyway, Dangerous Liaisons.
Oh yeah,
Stephen Frears was the director. He'd already done My Beautiful Laundrette, which was a fantastic movie, one of his early ones. Later, he did The Grifters, which I like a lot too. And this brings us to another one of our 1980s kind of stars, Glenn Close, who just nailed this movie. She made her first film, I think it was World According to Garp, which was before that. Then she did The Big Chill. She did Fatal Attraction. She did a few dogs in there too, and then did this film and still kept going. She got an Academy Award nomination as well, but did not win. It also more or less introduced Uma Thurman, Keanu Reeves, and Peter Capaldi, all of whom had done little bits and pieces, but not really much on film. I had forgotten Thurman was in it. Thurman, even though I've seen the movie a bunch of times, I was like, oh my God, it's her. Because at the time she was just the pretty young blonde. She wasn't Uma Thurman yet. Really, really fun movie. A drama with a lot of comedy, twisty and turny with these 2 rival aristocrats in France right before the revolution. John Malkovich and Glenn Close just kind of battling it out and using all these young, pretty people as their pawns, seducing them and betraying them and doing all these things. Just such a fun movie to watch. And the acting, especially from Malkovich and Glenn Close, is just extraordinary to watch. It is such a fun movie. And Michelle Pfeiffer, who I usually can't bear, actually comports herself really well in this as well. She does a really good job in the film as well. She cries a lot, but other than that, even she is bearable. She's come out of Grease 2 and managed to find a slot she can do good work in. So definitely love Dangerous Liaisons.
Yeah, surviving Grease 2 is important, and she did pretty well after that.
Yeah.
All right, I'm proud to say I've seen that. So yay! I'm actually, my biggest curiosity is how many of your movies on your list I've actually seen. So I'm 1 for 2. So it's not too bad.
Hadn't you only seen 5 or 6 of Roger Ebert's? I mean, come on now.
In which movie did Keanu Reeves have a better accent? Dangerous Liaisons or Bram Stoker's Dracula?
Well, he had no accent in this one. He sounds like he just washed up off the beach, even though it's revolutionary France. So there was maybe he was trying to enunciate a little better than usual. Dracula's got to win.
Yeah, barely, barely.
Well, right. I mean, if we're having to choose, yeah.
Oh, wait a minute now. Keanu Reeves' accent in Dracula or Kevin Costner's accent in Robin Hood. There's your matchup right there.
Actually, the one in Robin Hood doesn't bother me. It really doesn't, because he can actually act in that movie as opposed to Keanu Reeves in Dracula.
Ooh.
It's like accent is optional, just depends on the day.
It comes in.
If we wouldn't really talk about accents in a movie that don't make sense, Man on the Iron Mask drove me up a wall when I was watching that movie. You have the King of France talking like he's from California. I'm like so confused. Anyway, moving on. All right. Back to you, Dave. You're number 5.
Number 5. Let me check my list. Okay. So I've mentioned this before as I start. Some of you probably get it, but I largely was not very nostalgic about the 80s for a long time, except for my perennial favorites like Star Wars and Indiana Jones. I kept all those in rotation all the time, but I was never like really nostalgic about the decade until 2019. It was the year of my 30th high school reunion year, and my mind just started going back to those days, and I ended up just falling into the 80s nostalgia black hole. And I went on a tear of about 3 years of watching nothing but 80s movies, literally without exception, only movies from the 80s. Saw well over 150 of them. And some were old-time favorites I hadn't seen in a long time, some I'd never seen before. There was one movie that I hadn't seen since the 80s that I loved as a kid, and I hadn't watched it since. And man, it hit me upside the head with a 50-ton weight of nostalgia. And I was just so surprised by how warm this made me feel and how all the memories came back. My most pleasant surprise on the rewatch in my 80s deep dive was Karate Kid from 1984.
Wow.
I forgot how much I loved that movie. And even though I hadn't seen it since the 80s, every scene was coming back to me.
Right.
And I remember where I was and who I was with and all this stuff. And it's like the movie had somehow imprinted upon my DNA and it all came back. And I remembered all of it. And it was just, that was the strongest experience like that I had with all those movies I watched. So I have a recent renaissance, falling in love all over again with Karate Kid. So it goes high up on my list, number 5.
Nice. Very good choice. I remember seeing that in the theater, and we walked out when the credits were over, and we decided to go back in and see it again. So we just walked right back in, sat back down, and watched it again.
Man.
The greatest last 90 seconds of any movie in the 80s.
Oh yeah. But between Karate Kid and First Blood, Part 2, everybody I knew had a headband. You had to have a headband, and as long as you had a headband, you could beat up anybody.
First Blood Part 2, as in Rambo.
Rambo First Blood Part 2.
Okay.
See, you went to Rambo when First Blood was a much better movie. Come on now. Anyway, just whatever. All right. My number 5. This actually has one of my celebrity crushes in this particular film. Released October 21st, 1988. Starring Annabeth Gish, Julia Roberts, Lily Taylor, Vincent D'Onofrio, and Conchata Ferrell. Mystic Pizza. With the name of the actual pizza place that I've never been to, but always wanted to go to. It was the first feature film directed by Donald Petrie, who would go on to make Opportunity Knocks, Grumpy Old Men, and How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. By the way, a very young, very, very young Matt Damon shows up in the dinner scene as Charlie's younger brother. It's a wonderful movie. I remember seeing this. I want to say I saw it on cable, and I think I also watched it with a girlfriend at the time. And I love the small town. I love the story about the family and the sisters, that are going two completely different directions. It's about the haves and the have-nots, young love and heartbreak. The cast is great. I think the story still resonates now. I saw it on cable many, many times. But it was just great. It was probably my first rom-com that I fell in love with. And yes, I used to have a copy of that as well. And it's just one of those that never gets old. I love it. I force my wife to watch it. I try to find funny. I actually have to force my wife to watch a rom-com, which, go figure. But yeah, Mystic Pizza. And actually one of the people in this cast will pop up on another one of my movies later in my list. All right.
I have also never seen that one.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you some homework.
Okay. I don't have any reason not to watch it. I just never have.
I think I've seen it once. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lovely movie. It's really a lot of fun. It's nice seeing them, a lot of people at the very beginning of their career. So it was before Julia Roberts was Julia Roberts, you know what I mean? So I love the movie. All right, Jason, you're number 5.
Okay. I promise I didn't do this on purpose, but this is another movie from 1989. Okay. And for my money, this is the definitive best romantic comedy of the 80s. Okay.
I'm thinking it's on my list too.
Really? Okay. Well, does yours involve a gigantic fake orgasm at a delicatessen?
It absolutely does.
All right. Well, maybe we should punt that one down the road and talk about it when it appears on your list.
That's fine. We can do that. Sure. All right. Awesome. We'll come back to that one. Very good. All right. Robert, you're number 5.
All righty. This is one that kind of came and went off my list, but I had to leave it on in part to rebut Dayton from an earlier episode. My number 5 is Blue Velvet by David Lynch. I knew you wouldn't do a rebuttal episode for me, so I'm bringing it in here. It came out in 1986. It counts. It was unexpected for Lynch. I didn't really know his name or anything. I mean, before that, he had done Dune and he'd done Elephant Man, which were both interesting in their way, but they weren't super David Lynch movies until he kind of unleashed the full force of the weirdness in Blue Velvet. I thought the movie was amazing. I partly because I did not know how to respond, which I thought was great. With so many movies in the 80s being kind of feel-good movies and this and that, this was something that's way out of left field. I remember I sat and watched it my first viewing, and everybody around me was laughing, and I thought it was hilarious, and I was kind of cringing because it was so unpleasant. And then I went back a few weeks later with some friends, and all of a sudden I was laughing because it's humorous, it's macabre, it's creepy, it's just lots of things. But and it did get an Oscar nod for Lynch for Best Director. But ostensibly, it's kind of a mystery movie about what's going on in this small town. It had a lot of the beginning of Lynch's stock company with Kyle MacLachlan and Laura Dern and Dean Stockwell, people he would use in the future. And I'm a huge fan of the series Twin Peaks, despite its faults. It's like that relative you love, even though they're crazy. For Blue Velvet is almost kind of like a sideways prequel to Twin Peaks, down to the Angelo Badalamenti music and a lot of the mood and the vibe of it. But I think it's really an amazing film, and it does hold up to repeated viewings. And I think the first 10 minutes are just about the most fun, amazing, scathing thing I've seen about the 80s conformity and complacency that was out there for a long time. So I thought it was a nice film. Dayton, have at me.
Yeah, no. I said everything I wanted to say on the Film By episode, and I'll leave it there.
All right.
Have you seen that one, Dave?
I've seen it and I've enjoyed it, but I also don't want to revisit it very often. It is weird and it is creepy, but I also think it's a masterclass of filmmaking. So I've got full respect for David Lynch, and I'm a big Twin Peaks fan.
I've got a quick David Lynch story. I'm just going to throw this in really quick.
Absolutely.
So I watched Mulholland Drive one time on accident. Okay. So I thought I was getting ready to watch Mulholland Falls, like a Nick Nolte cop movie. So I ended up watching Mulholland Drive, and it got its hooks in me, and I had to finish it, but it was totally different than what I thought I was going to watch. So.
Yeah.
So now you know how I feel with Kramer versus Kramer and Tootsie. Like what the hell am I seeing? This is not the right movie.
It's the Sprite in the water.
so off-putting. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's a great story. Great. All right. Dave, we're back around to you. You're number 4.
But number 4, okay, so for the rest of my list, these are movies that have remained in rotation throughout my entire life. They didn't leave my rotation. So I said that other than those types of movies, my deep dive had me exploring the rest of the decade. These have never left. So it's hard for me to believe that these movies are as old as they are because they have always been fresh in my mind and a part of my annual habits. So number 4, I don't know how to tease this out except to say that it's actually the first of an embedded trilogy, and it is well, I don't know how to tease it up, but it's Star Trek II. I love Wrath of Khan. I grew up watching the original series and reruns, loved it. We grew up, playing Kirk and Spock all the time. Going to see the motion picture in 1979 at 8 years old was one of my very first excursions to the movie theater, and I was left very bored and confused by that movie. And I thought I was over Star Trek. And then my best friend saw Star Trek 2, and he was immediately like, dude, you've got to go see this. This is awesome. I was like, what? Really? So, of course, I loved it. It's a submarine movie in outer space.
Yep.
And Ricardo Montalban is absolutely just amazing in that movie. Everybody knows this movie. I love it. Star Trek 2. Give it to me.
All right. No, that's a great choice. I remember seeing all 3 of those in the theater. No, actually not the first one, but Con 2, 3, and 4 I saw in the theater. So no, I was expecting at least one Star Trek movie to make it on somebody's list.
I thought that was where my entry point to Star Trek. So from that point on, I never really fully trusted Chekhov. I thought he was like a bad guy. So
now that
turns out
makes
it's
sense.
just the earworm thing. So.
Just that one movie.
Yeah. My number 4, based on the SNL skit with Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi, it is the Blues Brothers. Have you seen this one, Dave?
Are you kidding me?
I'm just making sure. I just want to make sure.
Dozens of times.
All right.
It is higher up on my list. I will have it later on.
All right. Well, then you know what? We will come back to that when we get to your list. Sounds good. All right. Jason, you're number 4.
Okay, so my number 4 comes from Dave's favorite year, 1984. We get tons of great movies the summer of 84. It's amazing. Now, the interesting thing about this script was written by a waitress, handed the script to Michael Douglas. He took it, took an interest in it, turned it into a movie, and then she was killed in a car accident before 1985. So for me, my number 4 movie is Romancing the Stone.
Very good. Very good. I couldn't pick it because we did an episode on it. So
Oh, really? Okay. A lot of people say it's a Raiders knockoff.
It's not.
But that script was actually written before the Raiders script was written.
Yep. Huh.
So, and actually, due to this movie's success, Robert Zemeckis actually goes on to make Back to the Future, which easily is a Mount Rushmore movie of the 1980s.
No, yeah, 100%.
Yeah, Zemeckis' career was about to stall out. If this movie hadn't hit, you're right. We probably don't get Back to the Future.
That's right.
Oh, no,
that's right.
Yeah, it's a fun movie. I actually saw this one in the theater too. Loved it. Love it to yeah, it's a lot of fun.
It's so much fun. Yeah, love it.
And that's it's one of those perfect movies in that way. You kind of go in, you just have a good time. You don't really overthink it. You just have a blast, and it's so much fun from beginning to end. So yeah, great opening sequence too.
Yeah. Haley Heron, Playmate of the Month. Yeah.
Right.
My wife and I still quote this anytime we get lost somewhere or we're not sure where we're going. We'll be like, Cartagena all the way on the beach. Yes.
I love it.
Yeah.
All right, Robert.
All right, my number 4, also from 1984, and in a weird coincidence, also Kathleen Turner. But this is the other one she did that year, Crimes of Passion, with Tony Perkins and Annie Potts and a bunch of other 80s actors. She was another one like close. She just had she debuted in the 80s, and then she was like in Body Heat, and she was in Romancing the Stone, and she was in Prince's Honor, and she was in Roger Rabbit. That was a good year for her, and every movie she made was great. I think she's I don't say a forgotten star now, but she's not what she once was. But
right.
Crimes of Passion, what she took the film as kind of an antidote to her image she was getting from Romancing the Stone and those kind of movies. It is raunchy. She is naked for a good deal of the movie. It's Ken Russell pulled forward out of my 70s, top 70s films as well. He had a film in that list as well. I love his work. His American period, as this was a little different than his English stuff, but it's a satire about America and their problems with sex. Tony Perkins plays a weirdo, imagine, who is a reverend who is obsessed with sex, and Kathleen Turner is a dress designer by day and hooker by night, who has some issues of her own, and they meet up. Annie Potts' husband falls in love with the hooker, and it's thrilling and it's weird. It had an X rating at first, and they had to make some cuts to get it to where it would be releasable. Weirdly, Ken Russell being Ken Russell, a lot of what they had to cut out, he had flashes of erotic art, like Japanese erotic art from 200 years ago, and these different things that were not actual people doing anything potentially nasty. It was just artwork, but the studio was freaking out about the content of the artwork. So a lot of that was cut out. Love this movie. It's witty, it's funny, it's scary. It is really fun, and you can find a better cut of it if you look. I think the way it's out on Blu-ray now is the longer cut, not the cut up version. But it's nice. And Russell did have kind of a resurgence in the 80s, like I said, where Vestron Video, if you video store guys remember them at all, gave him a big check. And so he made a bunch of fantastic movies that are all awful, but I love them. Gothic with Julian Sands and Gabriel Byrne, and then Salome's Last Dance, and then Lair of the White Worm, that was an early film of Hugh Grant and Peter Capaldi again. They're all kind of sketchy and awful and low budget, but I have a big place in my heart for them because Russell is such an out there filmmaker that if you get into his groove of movies, you will almost enjoy all of them, despite their faults.
All right. Very good. All right, Dave, we're back around to you to your number 3.
My number 3 is Blues Brothers.
All right.
This movie spent, it feels like the majority of my life as my number 1 favorite comedy of all time. That position is now disputed and contested by Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? But whenever I watch Blues Brothers, I fall in love with it all over again. Watched it earlier this year. It was my son's introduction to it. He's a musician. He really got into the music of that movie. And for the next 2 weeks after that, he was blasting the soundtrack all the time. And upon a second viewing, he really got the humor too. And so I was really glad about that. But this movie is actually hilarious. Iconic scene after iconic scene. So quotable. You know, they started as characters that they would play, personas they took on in musical numbers on Saturday Night Live. They never did any Blues Brothers sketches. It was just their interest in blues that drove this. And they just adopted these personas. And then I guess Aykroyd decided there was a larger world to explore, and he wrote the screenplay, and they got John Landis to direct it. And it's just pure gold. I love everything about the movie. I love the comedy, and I love the music. I love the fact that it's driven by Dan Aykroyd's real life interest in it. I love they jam-packed it with real life musical stars and with the respect for the real blues. It's just, man, it's a perfect package for me. I never get tired of it, and it goes on the very top of my all-time list. It's in the top 10 easily. And usually I break comedies out separate when I'm doing lists because it's just hard for me to compare them to other types of movies. But this one's just so high up for me. I love the Blues Brothers.
Yep. So, let's mention a couple of the music artists here. You have Cab Calloway, James Brown, Aretha Franklin, Ray Charles, and John Lee Hooker. Actually, I love his scene when he shows up. A couple cameos I want to mention. Of course, you get Frank Oz at the beginning. Joe Walsh is in the prison at the very end. John Landis, of course, shows up in there. You have Twiggy and Steven Spielberg, who works at the tax office, which I thought was great. Also, Shaka Khan appears in the church, and Paul Rubens is a waiter at the same restaurant that appears in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. But yeah, so a lot of famous cameos.
There's another future star, the kid who's trying to steal the instrument in the Ray Charles store would go on to become Jason's favorite chauffeur.
That's right. Argon.
Oh, right.
Deborah
I didn't know
White.
that. That's awesome.
Deborah White, the future Argyle of Die Hard.
Man, I've seen that movie so many times and I never noticed that. That's great.
Right
I
when
love that.
when Ray Charles he pulls out the gun and he shoots the kid
Yeah.
trying to steal, that's the guitar, whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was Argyle.
Yeah. Couple other things I want to mention. The chase scene through the mall, which is just next level hilarious. So that mall was actually shuttered and scheduled to be torn down. So they went ahead and just let them drive through it and tear it up anyway. So I thought that was fun. I used to get into arguments with my mom about this movie because I watched it all the time, every chance I got. And she actually had the nerve to say, well, it's not believable. It's just so unbelievable. And I'm like, what are you talking about? They're on a mission from God. Of course, everything works out. And I looked at her and said, besides, you love Cocoon. How is that realistic? It's old people and aliens. Come on now. Whatever. But no, yeah, this on my list as well. So yes, I have the soundtrack on record, and yeah, I've watched it so many times. It's disgusting. So great pick. All right. My number 3 was also already mentioned by Jason, so I don't want to steal his thunder. So why don't you go ahead and go first with the fake orgasm in the deli?
Oh yeah, okay. So that was my number 5 overall, and your number 3.
Yep, my number 3. Yep.
For me, When Harry Met Sally is the greatest romantic comedy of the 1980s. You've got a young, vibrant Meg Ryan. You've got a funny Billy Crystal. You've got Bruno Kirby and Carrie Fisher, who are awesome as like the best friends. And it's just funny scene. I think it's so real. Like, you have the dating scenes and conversations that actually happen between men and women, and men and men and women. And I just love it. It's so sweet without making your teeth hurt. You know what I mean? It just makes you feel good. What do you think, Dayton?
So I actually saw this in the theater the summer it opened. I saw it a few times in the theater because I couldn't. Huh? Oh, yes, it was 89. Yes, I know. Don't worry. I actually have a couple more movies in my list that are in 89. So there you go. Right. Anyway, moving on. I remember one of our regular guests, Tim Brown, we actually went to go see it. He had a girlfriend at the time. And of course, I was single. So I was the third wheel, but I was also driving. Go figure that one out. But we went to go see it again. And I thought it was great because not only was the movie just fun to watch, the drive home and his girlfriend had all kinds of questions like, is she high maintenance? Is it, does the sex thing really get in the way? I just spent the whole drive home just laughing because it was so much fun watching him squirm. Now, it also works as a good Christmas movie because they did a couple Christmas scenes in there. And of course, New Year's Eve works too.
Yep.
This movie really did launch Meg Ryan's career. And as well as, Crystal was already kind of a star, but I think it elevated it because he went on to go host the Oscars 9 times and, of course, made City Slickers, Mr. Saturday Night, Forget Paris, and would eventually get to work with directors Kenneth Branagh, Woody Allen, and Harold Ramis. Another note I want to mention, Barry Sonnenfeld, who was the cinematographer on this movie, would go on to direct The Addams Family, Get Shorty, and Men in Black. So there's a lot of talent in this movie. And yes, it is the perfect rom-com. And it's a great movie, and I watch it probably at least once a year. Yes, When Harry Met Sally was my number 3.
Awesome movie.
Jason, your number 3?
Okay, my number 3 is Jaws 3.
What?
Did you have a brain tumor for breakfast?
Just kidding. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh my God. I know.
I just wanted Dee and Jeff to drive off the road right there when I said that. Dave's having a heart attack right now.
Yeah.
No. We're working on that. As a matter of fact, we're putting that up against a John Landis directed Saturday Night Live star comedy that's terrible.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yep.
Yeah, we got Jaws 3 versus Beverly Hills Cop 3 coming up. So just threw that out there just to scare them. My number 3, my legit number 3, has Mikey, Data, Mouth, Brand, Chunk, Steph, Andy, Sloth, Chris Columbus, Steven Spielberg, Richard Donner. It's called The Goonies.
Yeah, that's a lot of talent and power in this movie.
Really
for sure.
Quite amazing, right? It's every kid's adventure. I saw this when I was 12. The kids are about 12. They go on an adventure that they want to save their neighborhood, and they find a pirate ship and gold, and they're running from bad guys and bank robbers. And it was just the perfect adventure movie for somebody my age. And it's still maybe a Mount Rushmore movie of the 80s. Love it.
Yeah. And a lot of the people would go on to those kids would go on to some huge careers. So yeah, and Sean Astin's still working. Of course, Brolin goes on to be both Thanos and Cable. So, whatever.
Well, I can't argue with that pick at all. But Jason, I just want you to know that I legitimately believed you for a second when you said Jaws 3. I would not put it past you.
No, actually, I do have the Goonies one sheet on my wall over there in my movie room. So yeah, didn't make the list, but
yeah,
man, great movie.
I read something. Patty Duke, who is Sean Astin's mother, and John Astin, who is his not his biological father, but for all intents and purposes, his dad. Even though they were divorcing, they watched the screening with their son, and they held hands and sobbed through the entire movie. Watching their son just crush it on screen. I thought that was a sweet story.
That's awesome. I did not know that. That's fantastic. All right, Robert.
All righty. My number 3.
He's smiling evil. Uh-oh.
No, I'm not. I'm just from 1985, 8 Oscar nods, including Best Screenplay and again Best Art Direction and Best Costumes. It seems to be a thing. This movie kicked off a bunch of careers and even kind of a subgenre. This is a Merchant Ivory film. It was the first of theirs that kind of they banked on all through the 80s. A Room with a View from 1985.
Nice.
Talking about all those Oscar nods, I do need to circle back just for a minute to Crimes of Passion. It was the only one of my films that made my list that did not have a bunch of major award nominations, but it did win the Adult Video News Award for Best Softcore Porn Release of the Year. So anyway, not all highbrow costumes and art direction for me. I also Anyway, I told you Turner was naked a lot in this movie. I'm just saying. Anyway, I think Annie Potts shows a boob. Whatever. Anyway, Room with a View on a completely different tack. Completely. Fantastic film. It is based on a E.M. Forster novel from the turn of the century, but it is funny. It is warm. It is romantic. Maggie Smith and Judi Dench steal scenes therein. They're very, very funny. But the real dross and what makes it so fun to watch still is early Elena Bonham Carter and Daniel Day-Lewis. It was his second or third film. It was her second or third film. It was kind of their breakout for both of them. And they both just nailed their roles so perfectly. Weirdly, I saw this in the theater in 85. And that same weekend, I saw another Stephen Frears film who did Dangerous Liaisons. An earlier film, he did the film My Beautiful Laundrette, which is set in the kind of Pakistani subculture of contemporary London of the time. And this young Pakistani guy falls in love with this bleach blonde punk guy. And I saw that movie and went, God, that blonde guy is so great. And then on the same weekend, I saw Room with a View, and I said, oh my God, I don't know who that guy is playing Cecil, but he's so funny. And it was both Daniel Day-Lewis. He was so amazing in this like 1-2 punch of completely different periods, postures, hair colors, everything. I was like, I will go see all his movies, and I followed him since. He was just amazing. But Room with a View, it's charming, it's delightful, and it still holds up. That's one that we pull out once or twice a year, and it's just beautiful, beautiful film. Some of the later Merchant Ivory movies, they did a run of all of E.M. Forster's novels and then Henry James, and they did a bunch of things. None of them ever quite hit this high point, and it's a film I can recommend to almost anybody.
I have to admit, I have not seen that one. It is on my list.
Never seen A Room with a View?
I've attempted it a couple different times, but I always went with something else. But no, I've always wanted to see it, and I just have not gotten back to it. So
I thought you were working through the Adult Video Award list.
Well, I'm pretty sure Dave's going to watch Crimes of Passion this weekend.
I'm watching the werewolf. I'm watching the werewolf movie with Murder She Wrote in it.
Yeah, company wolves first, and then
a good double feature. Anyway, all right, Dave, getting down to the nitty gritty. You're number 2.
All right, number 2. Okay, so as an authentic geek, I have my obsessions, and y'all probably know a few of them because I'm out and proud with several of them. Beach Boys, soccer, 80s movies. There's another obsession of mine that I'm not as out there with, but you probably could still figure it out. I love sword and sorcery fantasy. I always have. I grew up. The tales of knights and dragons and castles and wizards and all that stuff. I actually write fiction in that genre. If I'm just going to plug it in right here, I have a series of novels called Galahad's Doom. You can find it at its own website. The 80s had a lot of fantasy movies. A lot of them were really bad.
Yes, they are.
It's a genre that didn't get budgets very often. But in 1981, John Borman gave us the best King Arthur story that I ever expect to see make it to film. I love Excalibur. I think it is brilliant. I love everything about it. I love the cinematography. I love how they're using light to kind of convey this idea of magic. And I love the stylized dialogue, the stylized costuming, the staging. I love everything about it. It's one of my absolute favorite movies, and I can't get enough of it. Excalibur, 1981. I'm pulling the sword out of the stone, and I'm declaring that my number 2 movie of the 80s.
All right. So I will refer all my comments to our episode where we compared Excalibur, the King Arthur movies from we did an episode. Robert was on that episode with me as well.
I have some rebuttals for you about that movie. Just go ahead and listen to it. I love it. King Arthur stuff too. Excalibur is not one of my favorites, but that is another episode, as Dayton said.
No, I'm not saying it's a perfect adaptation, but I am saying it's my favorite adaptation. I don't know of another King Arthur movie that I come close to liking, and I love Excalibur. Fair. Unless you're going to go the cartoon, I have to, it's actually pretty faithful to T.H. White. I'm not going to lie about that, but I'm going with Excalibur.
Very good. All right, so my number 2 and my number 1 have been fighting now for about 4 or 5 days, and it came down to almost a coin flip. And so this one was actually one that I saw on a whim. Tim Brown, again, we actually rented it from the video store at a Kroger in my neighborhood, completely knowing nothing about it. It was just the people that were on it. Christian Slater and Winona Ryder star in the ultimate high school movie. It is Heathers from 1989.
Love it.
Yes. Directed by Michael Lehman, who would go on to make Airheads, Truth About Cats and Dogs, and Because I Said So. Other people in the movie include Shannon Doherty, Renee Estevez as Betty Finn. Yes, Estevez. She is the sister of Charlie and Emilio. And just from putting it in from right away, the dark humor got me. I love the characters. I love the fact that it takes place in a fictional town in Ohio. And I was all in right away. It's the exact opposite of all the John Hughes high school movies. I have the movie poster, I had the VHS, I have the Blu-ray, and this is a proud father moment. For my daughter's first day of her senior year, she went to school dressed as Veronica. So it was wonderful. And they've also seen the musical version of it, and my wife and daughter both love it. And they also did attempt a TV series, which I did not watch because I'm afraid it was really bad. So love this movie, have for years, and I just never get sick of it. And just yay. And one of the greatest endings to a movie ever, when your lead character blows himself up. It's great. I love it.
When I think of black comedy, that is the only movie I think of.
Yes.
It's certainly my favorite in that genre.
Yeah. They did it so well.
And Slater is so quotable in that movie.
He is.
I love his character.
Yes, he is. Yeah, it's like he was channeling his inner Jack Nicholson.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Right. Absolutely.
All right.
Fun.
Wonderful. Jason, you're number 2.
Okay. I feel like I'm going to get some heat for this one. But when I sit down and I made my list and eliminated, 57 of the top movies of the 19th. Again, I'm not complaining, but when I came around and I said, what movie is my favorite, right? Like, what movie do I have the most fun at and just made me smile, and I just love it. So this movie has Mel Gibson, Danny Glover, Joe Pesci, Patsy Kensit. Lethal Weapon 2 starts off with a bang and just races like a roller coaster. You introduce a character that I think leveled it up. So you have Riggs and Murtaugh. You throw in Joe Pesci. You get comedy. You get action. Riggs is still a lethal weapon, but I just absolutely love this movie.
Yes.
It is
Very
a
good
roller
choice.
coaster of fun. The toilet scene, the okay. We still quote that all the I read that Mel Gibson was drinking 5 pints of beer before breakfast and still
Whoa,
the movie off. So
man.
he is at his prime. I mean, he's stud, looks good, pulls all the action. It's so much fun. I love it.
Yeah. That's a lot of beer. God, that's a lot of beer. Oh my God. How did he function? That's just crazy. Oh wow.
Oh.
All right. Very good. Very good. I was wondering if we were going to get a Lethal Weapon on there. So yes, and that's such a great Joe Pesci character, because later you get so used to Goodfellas and the really hard ass Joe Pesci. So I love that one. I love that character.
A lot of people consider it the best one in the whole series. It's
I'd agree with that.
It's one of the best action movies ever.
Yeah. All right. Very good. All right, Robert, over to you.
All right, my number 2. We've been circling Frank Oz all night with Blues Brothers and Dark Crystal. My number 2 is Little Shop of Horrors, the musical. It was one of the first films he directed entirely himself. It was kind of a hinged film from his puppet movies, because of course we have Audrey 2, the talking plant in this one, but 2 Dirty Rotten Scoundrels and movies without the puppets that he went into later. In fact, future plug for this podcast, in June we'll be talking about In and Out, which Frank Oz also directed. But Little Shop of Horrors, it is fun. It is fast-paced. I liked it especially because it's a really clean, great adaptation of the stage version. So often they make films of plays and they throw out half the songs and they change the plot. And then this is basically some of the same cast. It's pretty much straight up the play, filmed brilliantly, except for when the studio got involved and meddled with it. The original ending, as everyone knows who's seen the Jack Nicholson film or it keeps up at all, the plant kills everybody and takes over the world at the end. Well, the studio said, this is a musical. We can't have the plant win. And so they did some hasty little tacky reshoots, and the movie was released with a happy ending that does not sit right with us deep dive fans. Luckily, it's been re-released since on Blu-ray with the proper ending as an option you can watch. But great film, beautifully cinematic. I mean, it's you wouldn't know it was a stage play. Frank Oz's camera movement and his editing and his cinematography are just gorgeous. Ellen Greene is the one and only Audrey, and she got to bring it from the stage onto film, and it's indelible. And we were talking about Blues Brothers with lots of cameos. This movie, the same posse jumps out in this one too. We have Bill Murray briefly, John Candy, Christopher Guest, Steve Martin is in it for a little bit as the sadistic dentist. So you get your 80s comedy guys, but it's sweet, it's funny. It's such a great film. I watch this all the time, and it did get 2 Oscar nods itself for visual effects and song, but it did not win either, which I think is very sad, because I think it's a great movie that really can appeal to almost everybody.
Yeah.
I love it. I think Frank Oz did an incredible job with it. Rick Moranis is fantastic in it. That one scene that we get with Steve Martin and Bill Murray, it's one of the single funniest scenes of the entire decade. I mean, you take 2 comedic talents like that, a sadistic dentist and a masochist patient, and you put them in a scene together and let them work it out. And it is absolute comedy gold. Both men at the peak of their powers. I love that scene, and I definitely love the movie too.
There is a legendary, but yet to be unearthed footage where I guess Oz let them rip, and they filmed it like 6 or 7 different ways across a couple hours. Every time was different. Every time was hilarious, and they ended up kind of
Wow.
throwing a dart and picking the one that we got. And I guess people who have seen the other scenes, just it's like it's their best work. It's hilarious, and when you start stacking them up one after the other to see how many different jokes and gags they can pull out of the same setup and the same dialogue, just shows two masters at work. So hopefully it'll pop up somewhere as a bonus feature someday.
I would watch 2 hours of just that. That would be amazing.
Yes.
I think that's Bill Murray's first venture back into the movies after taking like a 2.5-year break. Isn't that right?
Was it?
He did Razor's Edge and he did Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
And then nothing until Little Shop.
Yeah, he took his big return was Scrooged, and Little Shop falls right in the middle of Ghostbusters and Scrooge. So I think you're right. Yeah. He showed up for that one scene. Yeah.
By the way, Robert,
Very good.
You just broke your streak. I was 0 for 6. We'll say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've seen one movie now on your list, so good.
That's how much I love this movie. I will.
And as I recall, there is no Japanese erotic art in Little Shop of Horrors.
None at all. And no period costumes, no crazy British director. It's just straight up American movie fun.
See, now I feel better. I've seen more than Jason has, so I feel better about myself.
And I pride myself on watching 80s movies. They're just of all.
I know.
So.
Yeah, Robert's naming all these highbrow European movies, and I'm like, Rocky IV is awesome.
Well, separate but equal, And I think educating the viewers is something I like to, or listeners, I should say, is something I like to do. Where I like to, I could go probably with some really more better known ones, but I want to shine some lights on some of my favorites that maybe don't get seen as much as I think they should.
All right, cool. Let's hit a few. We'll take turns hitting some quick honorable mentions before we do our number one. So, Dave, what didn't make your list that really wanted to be there?
Well, I didn't know if Karate Kid was going to qualify to be included.
Okay.
And if it did not, the next man up at the bottom of my list coming in would have been Red Dawn. Love Red Dawn. It was, that came out when I was 13 years old. All I wanted to do was like grab a bow and arrow and run to the woods. And I was going to, defend America. Love everything about that movie. Just watched it recently again. Still love it. It's awesome. And then aside from that, like I said before, it's hard for me to rank comedies with other kinds of movies because it's just how do you compare them? And so the rest of my honorable mentions are all comedies. They're probably my 4 favorite comedies of the decade, I'm guessing, because they're the first 4 that came to my mind. Airplane, Caddyshack, Naked Gun, and Christmas Vacation.
Very good. Good list. A lot of humor in there. Very good. All right. So the ones that were almost there it was tough to cut them, but I had John Carpenter's They Live, John Hughes' Weird Science, and Catherine Bigelow's Near Dark, which I consider one of the greatest vampire movies ever made, even though they never even say the word vampire. But those are the 3 that really hurt to cut off my list. All right, Jason.
So my near misses, again, minus the 57 that I had to cut off. My near misses were Ferris Bueller Was First Out, and then Real Genius and Roxanne. I absolutely love the Steve Martin movie Roxanne. I think it's sweet.
I do too. You know what? I actually took Real Genius off my list because I thought for sure somebody else is going to put it on. I feel bad not having it on there. Jeez. All right. Okay. No, I actually saw Roxanne in the theater. I was on a date. I saw. I love that. Still love it. It's great to this day. Very good.
In fact, if I could travel to one movie location, I want to go to Nelson, British Columbia. That place just looks like the coolest place to go. So,
yeah, I agree with that. All right, Robert.
All right. Well, David mentioned that all of his friends were running around wearing headbands back in the day, and mine were too. But that's because we were watching Xanadu and Can't Stop the Music, the Village People movie. So yeah, Xanadu I did not bring to the table because Amber. Team Amber mentions it at least once an episode, as I am to the Broadway musical. Amber can segue Xanadu into any conversation. So left that one out. And Can't Stop the Music, it's beyond niche. I mean, it's Steve Guttenberg and the Village People and then Bruce Jenner. It is and Valerie Brine, who usually does good work. Anyway, even she didn't have much to do in this. No one was looking at her boobs for the first time. Film her film career. But anyway, yeah, so Can't Stop the Music was a little too niche. I was surprised, and I left them off partly for this reason, that no one mentioned any of the movies from the kind of the Disney Renaissance, because we had Little Mermaid came out in that decade and kind of kicked off that whole thing where we got Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin, all those later on. But Great Mouth Detective has been covered on the episode on this show, and Return to Oz is one that I rewatched and it fell off my list for Disney. And then my last film was another one that fell off the list. I love Peter O'Toole. His movie, The Ruling Class, was in my 70s top 10. At the time, he did a film in 1980 called The Stuntman. I loved that movie. I remember that at the time. Saw it several times, but not probably for the last 20 years. Pulled out my, in this case, VHS of it, and it was bad. It was the main thing. He was extraordinary in it. Barbara Hershey is good, as good as she can be. And Steve Railsback, who didn't do a lot, but he was in it. It looks like bad 70s television, like just the way it's filmed. I don't know. The cinematography is not great. It looks like it was all done on the Universal backlot, even though it was filmed at the Hotel Coronado in San Diego. But it's one I thought, sure, it was on my short list until I watched it again, and then it fell off. I think if you haven't seen it, it's worth seeing one time, but lower your expectations and enjoy it for what it is. So many choices, not 57, but many choices to I got to review on this.
All right. Yeah, I remember that. So now I'm not going to go back and rewatch it because after that,
it broke my heart. Yeah. It was like kind of awful. Even it wasn't just like it wasn't what I remembered. It was kind of poor. So yeah.
I hate when that happens. All right. It's happened way too many times with movies I thought I loved. I watched it. I was like, what was I thinking? Okay.
Yep.
Cool. Now it is time for the number one. So we're going to do in order. We're going to have Dave start first, give us some clues and see if we can guess what his number one is. So let's hear some clues.
Okay, I don't think I need to give clues. I bet somebody here is going to guess it. I have almost the entire decade at my disposal here on the table. This is my favorite Christmas movie.
I got it.
Yes,
I got it. My favorite Christmas movie too.
And it's my favorite movie starring a chauffeur that was in Blues Brothers. Of course, it is
Die Hard.
Absolutely Die Hard. Watch it every single year. It is perfect, and everybody knows how perfect it is. There's no need for me to go on about it. I'm as big a Die Hard fan as anybody else.
So, quick Die Hard story. The same week I saw Die Hard in the theater, I saw the Rocky Horror Picture Show for the first time in the theater the same week. So I went from one of the greatest movies of the 80s to one of the worst movies of the 70s. All right. So my number one, here's some clues. We'll see how long it takes you guys to get it. It should be people that know me really well should be able to figure this out. So we'll see. Soundtrack includes Nancy Wilson, Joe Satriani, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Fishbone, and Peter Gabriel. It includes iconic lines like, "She gave me a pen. I gave her my heart and she gave me a pen." Oh, Jason?
89, man. I got it.
And it would be?
That's Say Anything.
That's exactly right. Say Anything. Oh, man. I love this movie so much. I mentioned her earlier. Lily Taylor was in Mystic Pizza. She returns in this one. Of course, you have John Cusack, Ione Skye, as well as two Heathers from the Heathers movie appear in this movie as well. So a really busy year for them. I wanted to be Lloyd Dobler. I watched this movie and I'm like, I want to be him. So much so that I ended up buying a really bad trench coat that didn't look good on me, but I wore it as much as I possibly could. But
Did you take up kickboxing, the sport of the future?
no, I did not. No, that was not my jam. No, that's not me. Um, he was just one of those characters that you really liked and that you wanted to be like, and resonated with him because, he was not good at talking to girls. Of course, he had friends that were girls, as did I. I just saw a lot of myself in him, and I just fell in love with the movie. Of course, it was the first time for Cameron Crowe directing a movie, who, of course, wrote the wonderful screenplay for Fast Times at Ridgemont High. There's nothing bad about this movie, and I love it, and I've fallen asleep to it, put it on, and just, got comfortable and on purpose. I actually own the expanded movie soundtrack, which includes demos for the song Girl Like You, written by the Smithereens, that was originally written for the movie and then was replaced by In Your Eyes from Peter Gabriel. So that iconic shot of him with the boombox, I have that poster, and it's just one of those things that if I could be a character in any 80s movie, even Star Wars, whatever, I would be Lloyd Dobler in Say Anything. So love this movie very much.
I love the pure sort of not innocent, but honesty that character has.
Yes.
He's sitting with his girlfriend's dad and, getting quizzed about his future. He's like, I don't really know, sir. I just want to hang out with your daughter right now,
Yeah, that was my next line. That was the next quote I had written down for you. Yes. Yeah, I know. I use that one all the time. When people ask me questions, it's like, I can't figure it all out tonight, sir. I just want to hang with your daughter. They always look at me like, what? I'm like, if you don't know, then you're just not my friend. Anyway. All right. Jason.
I've got it predicted right here. I just want y'all to know.
Okay. Wait, I can't read. What do you got predicted for me?
No, you can't see it yet. It's on the other side, but I've got it predicted right here.
Okay. All right. This will be interesting, Dave, because to me, there's a handful of perfect movies from the 1980s, right? You have Die Hard, which was ineligible for me. Back to the Future, ineligible. Raiders of the Lost Ark, ineligible. And this movie, which we haven't covered yet, because we've had a hard time matching it up with something that's worthy enough to compare it to. So far, the only thing we've come up with is Star Wars, okay? Because everybody universally enjoys this movie, okay? So this movie is from 1987. Another one directed by Rob Reiner. This is The Princess Bride.
Wow. I was not expecting that. Okay, now wait, look at Dave's face. Epic failure on Dave's part. Hot dog. Really?
Yes, I am the world's biggest Hot Dog the Movie fan. And but I was not prepared to put it on my top 7. But thanks, Dave.
We go back to Princess Bride. I don't mean to steal your thunder.
That's okay.
Oh, jeez.
So you've got Carrie Elways, you've got Robin Wright, you've got Mandy Patinkin, you've got Andre the Giant, you've got Billy Crystal, you've got Carol Kane, Chris Sarandon as Prince Humperdinck. All these wonderful characters, and they have this quest, but it's also a love story, but it's also sort of fantastic and goofy. I mean, it's not serious like Excalibur, and somehow I really don't know how it hit every mark and works perfectly as an action, romance, comedy.
Yep.
Love it.
Yeah. Actually, when I was going through my collection of movies, it was one of the ones I pulled out and, my first pass through my movies. And so, yeah. Wow. I got to admit, I was not expecting that. So that was a nice curveball. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
And the look on Dave's face made it even better.
Yeah, but you're right. It's hard to find a match for that. It really is.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people who put it on their all-time greatest comedy list, highly quotable. It's got heart. The scenes with Peter Falk and Fred Savage. They give you the heart of the movie. Rob Reiner, captured lightning in a bottle. It's awesome.
He did.
Yep.
When I was 14, let's see, what was I? Yeah, I was 14. They're like, we're going to go see The Princess Bride. I'm like, what? Come on. what do you? Come
Lethal
on,
Weapons in the theaters.
let's go see Nightmare on Elm Street 3. So, but they drug me. My group of friends drug me kicking and screaming, and when I left, I was like, "Dang, that was good, man." So
So you were Fred Savage at the theater, is what you were.
I was absolutely. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Awesome.
It's such a great movie. I work part-time at Cincinnati Music Hall here in town, and the Pops and the Symphony and all that. And the Pops was doing one of those screen the movie and play the music things. And usually they do Star Wars films or things with scores that we love. And they were going to do The Princess Bride. And I could not remember who wrote the music, and I could not remember one note of the music to the film. But I worked the event, and it was sold out, and we had people from 2 and 3 years old all the way up to like seniors, lots of cosplaying and bounding. And I can't recall. I mean, I was in the lobby. I was outside. We don't get to go in when I do my job, but the cheers and applause. I mean, every actor got entrance applause, and people were cheering the lines, and people. I mean, it was so exciting, and I still don't remember the music at all, even though our wonderful symphony was there playing away. Mark Knopfler even wrote an overture for the piece to be played live before the film that's not actually in the film. There was exit music he wrote for it. It was kind of cool. But just to have almost 2,400 people sitting in an auditorium just loving a movie at all ages, it was just so heartwarming and just made me feel really this is what movies are. This is what we love about movies. Everybody can get into it. And it was, even though the music is not great, it was the perfect choice because it was just such a great event all the way around.
That's amazing. I'm kind of hating my number one choice. No, just kidding. All right. Robert, this is going to be really hard. I can just tell it's going to be difficult.
Yeah, I'll give you some hints. Let's see. This is British director. He made 7 feature films. His first 7 films, all in this decade. It wasn't until the last one, though, that he had his breakout in '89. He uses, this might be a hint, he uses the same composer for all of his scores, kind of like Spielberg and Williams, but it is not Spielberg or Williams. You can't guess. Okay, I'm just going to go on with it. Any tries? Shot in the dark? Anybody?
Not yet. No.
1985 is the movie. The director is Peter Greenaway, who's really only known for The Cook, the Thief, His Wife and Her Lover, which came out in '89 with the beautiful Helen Mirren. But this film I picked. I could have picked any of his first 3 films. I love them all, but I picked A Z and Two Knots, his second feature, with the score by Michael Nyman, who I love. I disqualified my first pick, Draftman's Contract, because I picked that film for one of my top 7 best score films. Nyman's music is amazing. Greenaway is not for everybody. I actually pulled a quote because I couldn't have said it better myself. Roger Ebert back in the day said, "There's no middle ground for viewers of Peter Greenaway's work. Most reviews miss the point. It is not narrative. It need not make sense, and it is not too difficult because it could not have been any less than what it is. It is simply a work of art which Greenaway asks us to accept or reject on his terms." And it really is. He is a formalist. So he comes up with a bunch of concepts and ideas and then makes his narrative around them. He came out of the visual arts and said that for 100 years, movies had just been illustrated novels, and he thought that was stupid. He thought that film should be its own distinct thing and not just be a way to show novels on a screen with narrative and, whatever. So for Zed and Two Knots, and all of his films are super structured, it covers a bunch of different ideas. He said himself it was basically 3 films. It's about twinship and doubles. And in fact, a current filmmaker, Wes Anderson, loves Peter Greenaway because Greenaway is the king of the symmetrical, weirdly colored, beautifully lit shots. But twinship was one of his tent posts. Evolution and the the food chain, basically from smallest to biggest. And then the paintings of Vermeer and how he used his lighting. So he combined those 3 ideas and made a story around it. But then that wasn't enough. There's also 2 other filters. The alphabet, and he picked the alphabet because Vermeer made 26 paintings. So that made him think of the 26 letters of our alphabet. Hence, the title of the film is Zed and Two Knots. We got the Z there. So the film works as like an alphabet counting, where we start with decaying animals. It's part of it because Zed and Two Knots is also a zoo. So we start with time-lapse film of angelfish decaying. By the end of the film, we see a zebra decaying. So the alphabet's a filter. The number 26 is a filter that he and his cinematographer, Sasha Virney, who worked with Luis Buñuel and Alain Resnais and a bunch of European gorgeous cinematography, they came up with 26 different ways to light a film shot. So they used candlelight, daylight, moonlight, car headlights, like industrial lights, all these different ways to light. And these are all just kind of games and rules and structures he makes up for his films. And then he comes up with a story that he can work in all these obsessions and put them in. The filming is very formal, and that basically there's almost very little camera movement. There are push-ins and pull-outs, but that's about it. Because he's very painterly. So these gorgeous, stunning, gorgeously lit tableaus, and then people talk and say kind of weird things. But they're funny, and there is narrative, and they're dramatic. But as Roger Ebert said, not to everybody's taste. I am a big fan. Vince Canby of the New York Times wrote, again, I don't like to quote, but he said it so beautifully. Greenaway is pretentious, humorless, and worst of all, more boring than a retrospective devoted to television weather forecasts delivered over a 30-year period at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard
Wow.
Time. So, I loved him. Roger Ebert was kind of on the fence, and Vince Canby of the New York Times hated him. But did pick any one of his films, but I would say start with this one. If you get into it, you have many of his other films you will enjoy because they're all just as strange and weird. If you hate it, I've saved you some time, and you don't have to ever pick one up again.
Well, I was excited because I'd actually seen the other one you mentioned, and then you went on. It's like, nope, I haven't seen this one.
Oh, The Cook's Thief, yeah. Yeah, that was his breakthrough, and he always has big stars in his films. I mean, the British actors all want to work with him, but he is just a weirdo. You either buy in or you don't.
I am clearly not cultured enough to hang out with Robert. But I do agree with the critic. Everybody knows that the most exciting weather reports are at 10 p.m. Eastern time.
Yeah. See, I mean, Canby nailed that. Yep.
That was weird. Okay.
I got to ask, by the way, diving back to Say Anything, has John Cusack made a movie in the last decade? Like, where is he now?
Yes.
Actually, he was in Love and Mercy as Brian Wilson. He was fantastic in that movie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, he
for a while he was ubiquitous, and now it's like he just sort of vanished.
He's very active on social media, but no, he doesn't.
Okay.
He's kind of retired from a lot of acting. I mean, but the fact is, I mean, Love and Mercy was great.
Love and Mercy was wide release 2015. I think it was probably actually made in 2014. So it's been 10 years since that.
That's like a decade ago. Yeah.
We have to remember 2014 was a long time ago now.
Don't say it like that. Damn. That hurt. All right. Well, I don't know how to come back from
it's
that.
brutal. It is brutal. It doesn't sound like it.
Well, we just listed a whole bunch of movies from the 80s, and you're talking like 2014 was so long ago. Jeez. Thank you, Dave. I think I just aged 10 years. Anyway, whatever. All right. So I'm so glad that we got a very list. We actually had a couple crossovers, but not nearly as many as I was afraid of, which is why we kind of came up with the rules. So these are fantastic lists, and I am so happy that you guys were able to join me for this one. So, and apparently both Dave and Jason have some homework as well as I have a little bit of homework. I've seen a few more of Robert's movies than the other two have. So, but yeah, fantastic.
So, Jason, how many of yours were from 89? I counted at least 5.
1, 2, 3, 4. 4.
4. Okay.
And speaking of counting, my informal tally is that 5 of the films that were mentioned have been turned into Broadway musicals, because the New York theater is bereft of new ideas, and it's just banking on and pandering to all you Gen Xers who want to go see your favorite movies on screen. Back to the Future is playing right now in New York City to the worst reviews ever. Heathers came and went. Tootsie came and went. They are just mining them for anything they want. And there's no point because they all suck. Movies were great, but
Okay, well, that was exactly what I was hoping for with having you guys on. So great work, great lists. As always, thank you, Robert.
you're welcome. It was so much fun, and I don't even mind the hours I spent watching horrible 80s movies again that I thought I loved to do homework because it was still rewarding. Thank you.
Awesome. And Dave, why don't you take a minute to tell people where they can find Apples and Oranges and what you guys have coming up? What albums are you hitting in May?
Okay, so yes, Apples and Oranges is the name of our show where we compare the albums of the Beatles and the Beach Boys. We started with Please Please Me versus Surfin' USA. We are going to end with Sunflower versus Abbey Road. And right now, starting today with the same day that you're publishing this episode, we're also on a Wednesday schedule. And today's episode is on the Beach Boys album called Today. And this is the matchup of Today versus Rubber Soul. And that's actually a fantastic matchup because both albums represent the beginning of the mature phase for both bands. So one thing that's fascinating about the stories of these two bands is that they both evolved their art pretty much at the same time. They ran parallel to each other throughout the decade. And this is a case of they have both put their early eras behind them. And this is like the start of that new, mature, sophisticated direction. So we're getting Today this week. Next week, we'll do Rubber Soul. And so, and right after that, we're going to do Pet Sounds versus Revolver. So we're in the heart of the best part of this series right now.
Fantastic. Sounds good. All right, Jason, where can people find your podcast and what do you guys have coming up for May?
Okay, so D and I, we are the Surely You Can't Be Serious podcast. You can find it on all your favorite podcast platforms. We should be all over the place. What we've got coming up, we're actually we've been in 1984. We're about to shift into 1989 because we like to celebrate the 40 years, and then so we're going to hit 35 years. So we compared Tears for Fears' Songs from the Big Chair versus Wham's Make It Big, two big albums from 1984.
Yeah.
We just got done with our What the Heck Happened with Jeff Johnson, your buddy Dayton.
Yep.
Where we did Jaws 3 versus Beverly Hills Cop 3. I think right now we're getting ready to drop Heartbeat City by the Cars versus Reckless by Bryan Adams.
Ooh, those are tough. Man.
Then we're going to move into Revenge of the Nerds versus 16 Candles. We're going to do Great White Twice Shy versus Sonic Temple by the Cult. And then later on in the summer, we're going to do Lethal Weapon 2 versus Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade, both from the summer of 1989.
That's a lot of great albums in there too. So I'm excited for those episodes. That's going to be awesome.
Thank you. Hayden, what do you got coming?
What do we got coming? Well, let's see. May, we have actually quite a bit. Next week, we have Amber is hosting. We are covering the Ang Lee film, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. I will have Scott Hoffman and John Wright back, and we're going to discuss the Japanese animated film, Akira. Disney John is hosting a Dwayne Johnson episode. I believe Robert is on that one. And they are comparing Dwayne Johnson's version of Jumanji to The Jungle Cruise. And then, of course, every once in a while, we have to do a Star Wars episode. So we are covering the Star Wars trilogy. And with special guests, Van Allen Plexico, Patrick Albright, and John Reed. Of course, John Reed of the 30-something Movies podcast. So that's the rest of our month. It's going to be exciting. And once again, thank you guys for being here. Thank you, Dave.
It was awesome.
And thank you, Jason.
Thanks for having me, Dayton. Had a great time.
And of course, we'd like to thank the listeners for stopping by and spending some time with us. Reach out to us on social media. All of our social media information is in the show notes. If you are so inclined, we do have a Patreon for as little as $1 a month. You can have access to exclusive episodes, early access to our regular episodes, as well as some behind-the-scenes videos. And also do us a favor, rate and review on your favorite podcast app. If we see the review, we will gladly read it on an episode and share it on social media. It'd be great if you just share with your family, friends, and coworkers, because as far as we're concerned, more people, more better. Do yourself a favor and watch more movies. And we just gave you a whole bunch to check out if you haven't seen them. I'm sure Robert's list is probably a lot you haven't seen. And as always, physical media is better than streaming. The Docking Bay 77 podcast is produced and edited by Dayton Johnson. Recorded with Rode Pod mics, the Zoom PodTrack P4, and edited on Audacity. Opening music provided by Eric Jason Brock. You can find him on YouTube and Bandcamp. Thank you for listening.
Robert and I got to know each other a little bit.
Exactly.
Your connection seemed sketchy for a while. I hope you actually got everything you thought you got.
No, I heard everything Robert was saying, and then all of a sudden it was just gone. So
All right. So, Robert, you were on erotic Japanese art.
yes. And somehow it always comes up. I don't know. No.
Let me tell you about that mall scene. That mall scene scares me because this is John Landis directing, and those people look like they're in real danger. And because it's John Landis, I'm willing to believe that they really are.
Come on.
Dude, I'm not kidding.
That's dark, man. Why did you have to go there?
But I'm not kidding. I worry about those people. But
well, there's no
an awesome
helicopters, so at least there wasn't that.
No helicopters.
Anyway, so